The hot desert sun beat down on Sarah and Mike's broken-down car. Dust swirled in the dry heat as the car sat motionless on the side of a dusty road. Sarah frustrated, while Mike stood few feet apart, silently fuming. The air around them shimmered from the heat, and the vast desert stretched for miles, the road seemingly endless. As the sun set and the shadows grew long, Sarah and Mike's patience wore thin. They stood near the car, their voices raised in an argument. Sarah's face was flushed with frustration as she shouted at Mike, who was equally upset, gesturing with his hands. The car sat idly behind them, the distant horizon bathed in a fading, fiery orange light. The tension in the air was palpable, their friendship stretched to the breaking point. The argument settled into silence, and Sarah made a quick decision. She turned to Mike, her face set with determination. "I'm going for help," she said. Mike hesitated, but agreed. As Sarah set off, Mike followed her for a moment, but stopped. Unsure, Sarah walked ahead under the brightening stars, her figure growing smaller in the distance. Mike stood by the car, watching her, unsure of their future. Hours passed, and the desert night was cold and silent. Sarah had not returned. Mike sat beside the car, resting his head in his hands. The vastness of the desert stretched out, empty and uninviting. The stars twinkled overhead, but there was no sign of Sarah. His frustration had softened, replaced by worry. He glanced back at the empty road, unsure of what to do next. Worry turned to determination as Mike finally decided to follow Sarah's path. He walked into the night, calling out for her. The soft sound of his voice echoed in the stillness. The desert around him seemed endless, but his focus remained on finding Sarah. The dim moonlight cast long shadows as he walked with purpose, knowing that they couldn't survive out there alone for long. Mike finally spotted Sarah in the distance, sitting on a rock with her head in her hands. He approached cautiously. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and for a long moment, they simply stared at each other. The air between them had changed. No longer just anger or frustration, but something softer, a shared understanding. Mike sat beside her, and without a word, they shared the silence. The next day, a local farmer stopped to help, towing their car out of the desert. Sarah and Mike sat side by side in the back of the truck, the weight of the past few days lingering between them. Neither spoke much, but there was a shift. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, had forced them to confront the truths they'd been avoiding. As the truck drove into the early morning light, they knew things weren't fixed, but they'd made it through together. This story shows that sometimes the greatest tests of friendship happen when you're completely alone and the road ahead feels impossible. But together, you find a way forward.